I do you do cause I'm feeling so cool.
Welcome back. For this lesson, we're going to conquer some basic photo editing skills. And for this lesson, we're not going to really use the toolbar very much or the panels. We're going to use one area of Photoshop most of the time for this project, and it's going to be your image tab up at the top. So we're going to really be living right here in this adjustments tab. So we went to image, adjustments. We're going to go over all these amazing photo editing capabilities and talk about the differences between each one and when you need to use one. So I downloaded this photo off pexels.com, and you can find that in the resource guide. I'll have a link, or you can find a very similar photo. You don't have to use this exact photo. The reason I chose this photo is I thought it was a little bit dark, and we can maybe do some tweaks to it to maybe bring out a little bit more color. So we're going to do that by going to image, adjustments, and we're going to slowly work down kind of our list of lots of different options we have for really doing some great photo editing. So the first one is brightness and contrast. So we're going to bring up brightness and contrast. So I'm going to increase the brightness, and this will increase the brightness of all highlights in the entire photo. It's not going to just select a specific kind of highlight. It's just going to do a brightness of all of it. So you can see kind of before, just doing a little bit of brightness kind of really helps bring more light to the photo, to the overall photo. But we want to be very careful with brightness because you can definitely overdo it, and it starts to look really washed out right here in your skin tone because it does an entire brightness over the entire photo. It doesn't select specific highlights or shadows. It just does the whole thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back. We're just going to increase the brightness just a little bit just to bring some more light to the overall photo. So contrast. So contrast is incredibly important in finding the differences between highlights and shadows. So let's increase the contrast. It's going to make the differences between highlights and shadows greater. When we reduce the contrast, it's going to make the differences between highlights and shadows less of a contrast. A lot of times, reducing the contrast can really help brighten a photo. If you increase the contrast, it's going to increase those shadows as well. So sometimes this is kind of neutral. This is 0. So I'm going to actually reduce the contrast. You can see how it kind of really brightens a photo a little bit. So you'll notice with a lot of these, I'm not going to move the handles very much. You just need small little tweaks. You never want to have a photo look processed or over edited. So let's continue to go to our adjustments panel and check out a few of these others. Levels is great. As a graphic designer, I use levels a little less frequently. It's more for professional photographers. Sometimes it's great to bring out certain highlights or shadows, but I'm actually not going to go over this because I think for graphic design, let's just stick with what you need to know as a graphic designer. Definitely something a little more advanced that I would love to get into if we have some time a little bit later. Same thing with curves. So let's go down to exposure. So exposure, this is one you have to be incredibly careful with. Just slight changes in the dial will have huge effects. So exposure is going to expose more light to the photo, but you notice how quickly it looks washed out. So I have to be very careful when I use exposure. Usually it's only just very small increases or decreases. You're not going to see a lot of huge movements with exposure because as you can see, that's not going to look pretty good. So let's go ahead and reduce that. Maybe just do a very slight bump. And same thing for offset. When you reduce the offset, it's really going to bring out those shadows, and we increase the offset, it's really going to brighten up those dark shadows as well. So a lot of time with offset, sometimes offset and gamma correction are really great for bringing out highlights and brightness in black and white photos. So if you have a black and white photo that just seems a little dark, go into exposure and mess with the offset and gamma correction, and you can really bring out those shadows more and make a black and white photo that's hard to see a lot easier to see. So I really kind of find a lot of benefit when editing black and white photos. So with gamma correction, I'm just going to keep that at 0, but I just definitely wanted to go over that. Let's continue to work down the list. Let's do vibrance. So vibrance is really going to add more color. It's going to really exaggerate the color in a photo. So if I do max vibrance, you notice how the oranges and her skin tone really start to come out. When I reduce the vibrance, it almost kind of strips away that color. So that can be helpful, or you can reduce the vibrance and make it a little bit more grayscale if you'd like, or strip away a little bit of that color, depending on if you want to kind of reduce kind of the peachiness or the pinkness of her skin, or if you want to bring that out. And so saturations is going to do an overall treatment to everything in here, and it's going to bring out a whole lot more of those warmer tones. or a whole lot more of those colors. If we were to reduce saturation all the way to 0, you'd get black and white, or something pretty darn close to black and white. And if you increase it all the way, you definitely don't want that kind of skin going on. She probably needs to go visit the doctor. So I'm going to keep saturation, probably even reduce saturation. I mean, it's nice to add color to the face, but sometimes reducing saturation can give it kind of more of a modern, kind of that washed out, more cool tones seem to be kind of more in when it comes to photo editing. So let's go ahead and go down to adjustments. And we have color balance. So color balance, this is when we get to really kind of select specific parts of the photo instead of just doing these big, broad, let's change the entire photo without selecting anything. This is where we start to get to pick certain parts of a photo and change just those certain parts. So this is with color. So I can select midtones, shadows, or highlights. It's going to change your midtones, your highlights, or your shadows depending on which tone balance you select. So I can add specific colors to this. So I can add a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, and this is where you can really start to customize a photo. We can go to highlights, and now it's going to do the same thing to the highlights. So we can have our own kind of color profile here depending on what kind of look are we going for. It could be for a certain magazine, and we need to adjust the colors to match other photos. We may need to adjust the colors to match a certain style of an ad. So as a graphic designer, this is probably going to be what you'll do more, is adjusting this color slightly. You're not going to be doing heavy duty photo editing. You're mostly going to be trying to match certain cool tones or warm tones in a particular design piece. So I just added a little blue there to my midtones. Of course, you can do shadows and make it more dramatic if you wanted to. You can always go back into your history panel and kind of see what we've done. Here's the original, kind of darker. We added a little bit of light to it using brightness and contrast, a little vibrance, little color balances, adding those cooler modern colors in.